Brother Bald, why are you talking about cat people? Warpugs, Zachariah the 26th Primarch has brought us something a little bit different. This is Baldermort talking about the Felinids. Yes, Felinids are a thing. Yes, they are cat people in 40k. No, you are not having a fever dream. This is something that exists in 40k. And I don't know quite why. But Baldermort's here to tell us all the details. Guys, I cannot believe that I can't believe I'm about to partake in this. Let's jump right into this, guys. It's cat people. It's 40k. It's the best flat-out lore person in 40k. It's Baldermort. Let's get right into it. I'm gonna cry. Hit the like button if you haven't already. Subscribe if you haven't already. Cry with me if you haven't already. Let's go.
Felinids of the Militarum Auxilia. Lore and commentary will begin after a brief story to get us in the mood and show us what is to be discussed.
Okay.
From the Bald Library, Scratch and Sniff.
Oh, Christ. Come on, man. Now, I haven't seen, I haven't been able to check out Baldermort's channel in, the past few months of his releases. I haven't been able to see. And if you're like me, you don't, I don't check out many channels that you guys request. Just simply put, because if last time I did that, you guys threw a rock at me, and it hurt my feelings. It made me sad. But, well, let's go. I love his new style here.
It was rare. Very Militarum Auxilia. They were of the 73, and not high up the list of purity either. Most of the time, these things were in a form of semi-quarantine. I remember when I read the orders assigning some of them to my theatre. It was like someone threw a cup of cold vomit right in my face. We'd fought hard for months, held ground none could have dreamed stable. No air support was possible, but the most blatant, and thus the least useful in this scenario. We'd not been reinforced for all that time. Resupplied, of course, but not rotated out. We were supposed to have been overrun weeks ago, according to wide-eyed convoy men. Top brass could not believe it, so they dared not cycle us out. We'd been the only units able to hold them at the tree line. And this was the most horrible of postings. Jungle warfare.
Yep.
They came at any time, odd times, all the time. Wave after wave of them. All would be still, but never silent, of course. There was always a cacophony going on in that damned jungle. Then,
Orcs.
out of nowhere, a scream would rent the air, and then they'd all bellow that horrific war cry of theirs before hurling themselves at us time and again. If we broke them, they always came back.
Orcs.
If they hit us, they made bloody bits of our lines before we withdrew, formed up, and drew up new firing lines and cut them down with volleys.
Nice.
We lost the 13th, 15th, and 19th before we learnt to do the unpalatable. So, sometimes we even fired into their melee and hit our own. But if we didn't, they simply charged the next block of us and repeated the carnage. We lost the 17th due to hesitancy. Never again. We fought back each time, of course, but they were huge. Muscular, fast, ferocious, feral, and deadly. Greenskins.
Yes.
Orcs. They made recon nearly impossible. Most think of them as morons who are little more than animals. But this is not the case. Oh, they're animals, all right, but not dumb ones. But we had to try. We had to know if they were mustering and in how many numbers. We tried. But this was their realm. Close, violent, personal. The scouts we sent out into that jungle rarely came back, and never with their full complements. Vicious spike traps, ambushes, all resulting in attrition too high to risk our scouts, but it was too important not to use them. All of this, for months. And they had sent us a regiment of Auxilia.
Yep.
A mere few thousand, and the men would not like it. Not one bit. Or so I thought. We all did. But they also sent heavier firepower to fortify our positions.
Okay.
Many more guns for box barrages. Many mines. Many heavy emplacements. It looked like they wanted us to dig in further and really punish the orcs. We were up for that, of course. But why the Auxilia, then? They arrived by chimera convoy like any other outfit, but they kept to themselves and disembarked straight into their camp zone. Commissars were patrolling the entry points into their section of the camp, keeping all away from them. At this point, nobody knew who or what they were. We just knew they were Auxilia scum. We dug in, as instructed, and the commissars called a mass meeting to discuss the newcomers' duties. Shocked, we were told these poor blighters would be exclusively going out as our new recon duty, and their remit was not to find the enemy and record report and then retreat. No, they were to goad the enemy into the camp's enhanced defences. They were supposed to go out to purposefully anger the greenskins. High Command had conceived that we would be able to punish them and truly get to grips with their numbers. If we could drain their forces enough, their numbers brought down, they could be containable, and then Command could go back on the attack. Then I was escorted to their encampment to view the fighting men and women they had sent us for this suicidal mission.
Yay.
I was prepared to have to hold my gorge, to then wash my hands when I got back to my quarters to wipe away the filth. Yet when I saw them, they were not like anything I had ever witnessed before. My escort was a set of commissars that looked like they ate their own kind for breakfast. Hard men, even amongst the elite of the Schola Progenium. These were the commissars that would execute an entire company with their own hand, rather than see even one of them retreat. And then I saw them, stood to perfect attention, rank upon rank of them. They looked so much like us at a distance that I was relaxed when I came closer. And instead of fearing them, I viewed them more as a curio, an oddity. They snapped a simultaneous salute every bit as sharp as my own men. They were rigid, disciplined, well-trained, at least in this regard. I could only hope that they would be as effective as my own men, but I could not see how they would survive in that terrain against that enemy. Jungles filled with greenskins, feral orcs. For none of them were particularly big. None could make it into a grenadier formation, is what I thought then. Each was wiry, barely a scrap of fat on any of them when I went in for closer inspection. Each had a short, downy set of fur across every inch of them. I had worked with feral world regiments before, but this was not being unkempt or shaggy. They had fur on their faces. Their eyes, that was the worst of it. Those slits instead of circles in the middle of their orbs, it made them feel more different than they were in any other regard. Even when one answered my bitten-off question and revealed their sharp teeth and huge canines, it was still the eyes that were the most disconcerting. Like being watched by a dragon or another otherworldly predator. But they acted just like my own men, at least while I was present. When I discussed their position and duties with their commissars, I expected sneers and shrugs, or even outright rebellion. But no. I was shocked to be told that they knew their role and were looking forward to taking the fight to the Xenos scum. I shook my head, for despite their hard
I keep on wanting to comment, but I'm not going to, not right now.
Obviously did not know what they were talking about. How could they? To be so blasé about their orders, for they spelt certain death. Again, so I thought. It was the first engagement that wiped away my concerns, and after the third, I was not even concerned about them being in the same camp anymore, and certainly not for their safety out there in the perpetual green of the jungle. They were simply amazing. I learned to never question High Command again, for they must have been divinely moved to give us such warriors. They were gifts from the Emperor himself. For these Felinids, they went out there, hiding in the trees, crouching in long grasses, darting in and out of shade and shadow, while the orcs tried to get closer to our fortifications so we could not order massed bombardments without hitting ourselves. The Felinids danced around them like they were Grok's cattle herds. Time and again we witnessed the Felinids come running back to our lines and diving over the embankments and palisades even. Their speed and agility were terrifying to behold. And every time they darted home, they dragged huge mobs of orcs with them, directly onto our well-prepared firing lines.
Gotta love it.
The slaughter was soul-enriching, life-affirming. Often, they would then go out again to check that the full extent of the orcs had been destroyed. Entire carpets of twitching greenskins lay before our ramparts. We sent out details to clear and cremate them, always while being watched over by our Felinid allies. Over the next weeks, the haul from each goading party of Felinids became thinner, and finally, their officers asked if they could coordinate large sweeps into the jungle to take the fight to the orcs.
Yay.
And with them watching over us, supporting us, drawing smaller groups of orcs into well-prepared traps. The amount of heads we had taken was the envy of the entire army. Despite their strange genetics, these warriors were the toast of the camp near every night. We were winning this war now, because of a mere 2,000 of them. The only oddity that I ever could not quite compromise was that they never, ever had any fires in their camp, and when they ate, it was never, ever with us. But some things are best left alone. In the Guard, if it is not a problem, then it isn't a concern. We have wars to win.
So many people, I have always said this. If you were to give me a list of the enemies of man in the Imperium to have invade my planet, near the bottom of that list always, unless we're talking something like the Harud or the orcs, because the orcs are hilarious to conceive of in terms of, seeing them fight, but they would be horror incarnate to actually engage. Because you have a monstrously big, incredibly tough opponent that simply will not die, has no fear of death, and only exists to get in range with you and hit you with a large, semi-sharp object because they don't sharpen nothing. Their technology is ramshackled. They could throw a riding lawnmower on top of a box and it would start going 120 miles an hour simply because they believe it to be so. The orcs, in of themselves, are the most terrifying of the threats that you could possibly face. The only ones that are worse is, for me, chaos. Because there's really not much you can do against chaos. With Tyranids, you're getting space bugs of death. They want to eat you. With the Necrons, they just want to kill you. With with the Tau, they just want to subvert everything about you and turn you into basically their little slave. But the Orcs, you don't want to know what they want. You really don't know. There's no clue. There's only a few enemies I'd place higher on a list of things I wouldn't want to get invaded by in the 40k universe. Orcs easily are in the top 3. Drukhari, Chaos, Orcs. Probably in that order. Let's go. Kitty!
Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the factions, forces, and faces of the Warhammer 40k setting, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace. There is only time for war. And today, we shall be taking a brief look into an element of the Militarum Auxilia, and specifically Homo sapiens hirsutus of the planet Carlos McConnell, the Felinids. But first, let us get a basic comprehension of what that means. For most with even a passing knowledge of the Imperium of mankind are aware that it is, as oft touted, the most barbaric regime imaginable.
Yes.
Well, for humans anyway. Let's not dwell on the Drukhari of the Dark City or the horrors of the Chaos Lords. And as such, any form of deviation from the norm is not just frowned upon or derided, but most often actively sought out and quashed.
True.
Although exterminated with great prejudice is far closer to correct terminology. Now, this is not just based in ignorance and superstition, although they have a hefty part to play in the reasoning for such annihilations. For many forget that during Old Night, the period where the old human Star Federation fell and the coming of the Imperium, there were thousands of years of darkness, where humanity was near pushed into extinction. Alien races saw the weakness of humanity and fell upon us, enslaving, exterminating, or even farming entire populations of humans for faith or food.
This happened.
But either way, sustenance. In the grim darkness of the far future, it is not simply illogical rage that makes the Imperium so dangerous. It is the racial memory of having Xenos boots on human throats. The Great Crusader found so many human colonies either utterly destroyed or placed under the thrall of truly terrible beings. There is no wonder that this shock, the viewing and then collating of so many instances of atrocities, burned itself onto the memory of humanity. And this was then reflected in how they treated others, aliens especially. For in the initial waves of the Great Crusade, there were races who were left alone and even offered protectorate status if they were of use and were not guilty of being a threat or a historic enemy of humanity. But as the crusade went on, even these tiny slithers of clemency were finally eradicated. For there really is only so much a man or woman can take before their hearts grow cold. Their rage is initiated, and vengeance is the only thing that they can consider. But how does this pertain to the current subject? Well, it has to be noted that humanity tried many things in the periods between its golden age of technology and the rising of the Emperor, thousands of years later. For the warp was filled with storms, and travel was largely impossible outside of brief windows of opportunity that never lasted long. And the worst of all wars since that between the Necrons and the Old Ones had blasted much of the galaxy and destroyed so much of the power base of humanity, its technology. Perhaps it was the cybernetic rebellion that required the assistance of alien races to defeat them that was used as a backdrop to the assaults on humanity in that period. It is impossible to state for certain, but the unleashing of the cybernetic rebellion could well give a cause. Hence, colonies that survived this rebellion and were cut off from the galactic empire of humanity were suddenly left adrift in the Sea of the Void, without supply, support, or succor from the rest of the race.
there's a lot of things that happened that led to the actual collapse of humanity's golden age. And the rebellion of the Men of Iron, you had the Eldar doing their shenanigans, which made warp travel increasingly hard. You had at least a dozen catalysts for the fall. Each one of them humanity could have handled by itself, but they all came at right around the same time. Death by 1,000 cuts. Take a look, if you want a historical context to take a look at the Bronze Age collapse. This event is based heavily off that.
So when enemies came, they had little recourse but desperation, and she is the mother of all innovations.
Mm-hmm.
Hence, over the period, many human strains broke off from the genetic baseline, and these were dubbed abhumans, still humans, but not entirely of the standard. Some strains were due to environmental circumstances, as with Homo sapiens gigantus being ogrins,
Yep.
or Homo sapiens minimus, the ratlings, who would not be out of place offering a wizard a good day on a fine morn. Yet this is not the case for all abhumans. Some humans were changed to a warp taint, becoming mutants, and this was barely tolerated by even the Crusade. Then, as time went on, the Imperium no longer needed their manpower for its wars, so they were often butchered.
Mm-hmm.
Not all, but many. And now they are an underclass in some worlds, but most just get rid of them. Now this is mainly due to the belief that they may be tainted and thus unloved by the Emperor is the party line. But it is those at the top tier of society who may be permitted to know about chaos and that are motivated by this knowledge to wipe out mutants.
Right.
But the difference between a mutant and an abhuman is significant. For mutants have children that can be utterly different to themselves, with no consistency of what traits are passed on to the next generation. It is simply the roll of a dice, and results can be terrifying. In the case of abhumans, they may well be different to humans, but they are a stable genetic variant. So if an ogrin breeds with another ogrin, they produce an ogrin. And the abhumans are not well treated at all, but are considered at least human.
In a
As
way,
I was
yeah.
saying, many forms of abhumans are due to environment, but others are due to genetic engineering. It could be for a myriad of reasons, to change humans so that they could thrive on a planet simply not suited to us, or sometimes it would be to provide advantages that improve their performance in battle against all assailants. With the Felinids, Homo sapiens hirsutus, it is clear that their genetics were altered and elements of Terran felines, or cats, were blended in. As such, they have exceptional agility, endurance, speed, and very acute senses. They are able to perform feats of acrobatics that are closer to Eldar than human, and have a soft covering of fur over their entire bodies, even their faces, and of course, extended canines and sharp teeth. They are known to come from only one world in the galaxy, the planet Carlos McConnell. Usually, they are semi-quarantined, the Imperium acknowledging that they exist, but keeping them hidden like a dirty secret, as many abhumans are. Of the many strains of abhumans discovered in the Great Crusade and the Age of the Imperium, only 73 of them now exist,
True.
with tens of these strains teetering on the brink of extinction. And the Imperium will not usually take much interest in supporting those on the way out. Why should they, when the worlds they populate could then be filled with true, pure strain humans? With the exception of the most prolific and very close to human ogrin and ratlings, generally other abhumans are left to their own devices, and it is exceptionally rare to encounter one outside of their home system.
Yep.
Yet, as with all of the Imperium, it is so huge, has existed for so long, that there are occasional members of this abhuman race in the darker corners of hives, or spoken of as mythic, but based on very real encounters. And on rare occasions, they are called upon to provide a tithe. There is nothing much on their world of use to the Imperium, so it is presumed that when they are tasked to fulfill their tithe, they do so in manpower, who will swiftly be trained and deployed in the Militarum Auxilia. So now, we must touch on that body. For many trillions of men...
So what he was saying, there's a few other abhumans that are regularly brought into the Imperial Guard. Now, the one that you first encounter, of course, the Augrans. Then you have the Rattlings, of course. Felinids are probably one of the third to fourth, if you're getting into 40k, that you learn about. But there are a few that are outright freaky. There are some that quite seriously are Slenderman-like and can see in the dark. I don't remember what they're called off the top of my head because I'm an idiot, and I'd have to go and look because I'm terrible with names. For some reason, this morning I've had the worst problem with memory whatsoever. But as soon as he started talking about them, I started thinking about our brothers of the night who would have considered Nocturne too bright, which is a statement in of itself.
And women in the Astra Militarum would be deeply offended to be considered similar or of equal worth to the abhumans of the 73. The propaganda used by the Imperium is humanocentric, of course, so the abhumans are treated as subhumans, and this continues into their training. For most abhuman regiments are taught by Ministorum priests that they are unworthy, somehow stained by their difference, so that they have guilt ingrained into them at a very deep level.
Mm-hmm.
They have to work and sacrifice themselves to the wishes and wars of a god who can be persuaded to forgive them for the crime of their own birth. They need only show fanatical devotion to the Emperor for him to forgive and then love them, as he does the rest of humanity. It can mean that many abhuman regiments are every bit as fanatical as those from Krieg.
Yep.
As they are rare and quite important resources in war, and to make certain that nobody construes them as being equal to humans, they have the Militarum Auxilia. Alas, no matter how devout they are, the Officio Prefectus will send their most hard-bitten and fanatical commissars to lead and watch over these regiments. And often these regiments have the most priests of the imperial cult ministering to them, watching them, and punishing them alongside the commissariat. Yet when they are deployed to a war zone, the deviations that mark them out are what define their increased effectiveness in battle. Hence, the Militarum Auxilia are not just detached due to their special requirements in the chain of command, but also due to their lethality and the requirements to be used in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Although an officer of the Auxilia will most likely not shed a tear for any they lose in combat, they show their devotion to the Emperor by making sure that the skills of their units are not squandered, not simply thrown away as a first wave of any assault, bullet absorbers and the like. It is a difficult line to walk, and can be the cause of tension between wings of the Astra Militarum if particularly truculent and dense officers are in charge of the campaign. The Felinids themselves are not well documented, and there are only brief notes from a rogue trader who discussed them with a Kroot of all things. Nothing has really been stated about their culture, history, or way of life. So hopefully, this will be a nice surprise one year, when Games Workshop decide to get their finger out and provide more options in the Astra Militarum range. For I have often wanted to start an Imperial Guard army and convert a few squads to Felinids, to go with my Scots, Ogrins and Rattlings. Perhaps I will even throw in a few Longshanks, Neandors or Goliaths. But that is definitely a subject for another day and another video. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. If you have enjoyed this video, then do consider hitting the subscribe button and the notification bell, as I would not want you to miss out. You can support the ongoing work by joining the Patreon if you are in a benevolent mood. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun.
Yay!
Toodaloo.
Warpugs. I'm glad he mentioned them, the Longshanks. They're the ones that have the extremely long limbs and look like Slenderman. the amount of different abhumans and the ways they can be employed in combat. I love the fact that he went into detail and described that tidbit about them, because the fact of the matter is, as with every single unit of the Astra Militarum, you do not want to employ them in a situation where their particular skill set isn't called for. And I don't mean your typical, your typical regiment of Imperial Guard. That's not your typical cut of the mill, like just recruited off of Agri World Imperial Guard unit. Isn't going to be something that you have to worry about. Oh well, do I need to put them? Because you're going to put them in the most rear guard spot imaginable. But if you need to defend a location, you do not want to put Harkonnen Warhawks there. You just don't want to do it. If you're looking to assault a position, you don't want to use Morian Iron Guard unless you have a really, really experienced command teams. You want to use the units the way that they are meant to be used. And with the Felinids and, Longshanks, I keep on leaning towards the Nightkin. You want to use them as intended. Now, all things considered, it always amuses me when people hear about the Felinids. They think, "Oh, cat people," They think about them like, I don't know. It's so weird. And then you get the real look at them, and it's like, no. Warpugs, this is Baldermort. I'm glad that he addressed this, because one of these days, either the heat death of the universe was going to come first, or I was going to reach the point where I was doing lore videos and I actually talked about the Felinids myself, and I would not approach it nearly as maturely as he did, because I'd have just been like, every couple of feet, the cat people, throw a ball of yarn at them and they're screwed. Just like, that is their essential weakness: catnip and yarn. Warpugs, Baldermort continues to be the best lore channel for 40k that I have ever heard. And yeah, I love the story at the beginning, because quite frankly, the Felinids in a jungle environment with able to use their agility would be nigh unstoppable. I'm gonna head out from here, Warpugs. Be sure to check out Baldermort's channel. Subscribe to him if you haven't already. Subscribe to me if you haven't already. Hit the like button, join the channel as a member or a Patreon, and I'll catch you guys next time.